Edinburgh Napier, Learning, Teaching and Assessment Resource Bank.
Bill Buchanan from the School of Computing has created a whole series of online lectures, but instead of just including text and bullet point notes, he's given his students a downloadable format of the entire lecture, complete with voiceover and demonstrations. And what's even more unique is this can be downloaded via iTunes onto iPhones and iPads as well as laptops.
It's the full lecture that they would get as if they had came along to the actual face-to-face lecture. So every one of our units actually has a 1 hour lecture, including all the demonstrations that we would actually give in the classroom situation. Along with that, we also have little snippets of the labs that they'll actually do, so students can go along to our labs and then play back what was meant to happen in the lab. We find that that's one of the most useful things, that students often go into lab quite cold and don't actually know what they're meant to be doing, so we allow them to be able to watch someone demonstrating what should happen in the lab, and we find that reduces the number of questions that they ask, because if they're stuck on any one little bit, typically at the start of the lab, they can play the whole lab back again and actually watch somebody doing it. It also gets around the problem that students might say, this lab doesn't actually work, I can't get it to do this and that. And you say, well, just watch the lecture, the lab demonstration, and you can actually see how someone else has done it. And
the lectures which they can download also have your own voiceover as well, so again they're really not missing out on anything.
That's right. I mean, I think that is an important part. The audio is probably one of the most important things, especially for mobile devices. Students will often play back the lecture just listening to the audio, so they could be sitting, I know a few cases of students sitting on the bus or the train before the assessment, and then they plug in the downloaded podcast that they've done, and they'll just listen to the basic audio and play it back so that they can actually understand most of the key principles. In that way, students have never actually said after an assessment that we didn't get coverage of that, or we didn't quite understand that, we didn't quite see where that was coming from, because everything that they get is actually coming from the online material that we provide.
Okay, and this is something which they can obviously download onto their laptops. We've seen go into iTunes Store, actually download it onto their iPods. So as you said, sitting on the bus, they can be reading it, listening to it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we think a key focus for the future is towards the more ubiquitous devices, iPad, iPhone, and so on. Mobile devices will become so easy to use, so cheap. Bandwidth isn't a problem anymore. Storage isn't a problem. So we find more and more students are using their own phones as a way to access the material. So we make sure that students have every single way that they can access the material. So we also have students who don't have broadband. So often a student will start on a course and say that they're in a new flat, they don't have broadband, and then will ask for a standalone version of the lecture. So we provide that. So we have a full executable program that they can put onto a USB stick, and they can get it onto their own computer without having to use the internet. So we make sure that no student is ever not given the opportunities to be able to view the material. We find it especially useful for students who are working in local companies, and they can still stay and work and watch the lectures.
Just how beneficial do you think the students have found this to be? I mean, as you said, you've done this for a few years now. Just what are the benefits you've seen?
Well, I think the students love the module. No student has ever said it wasn't a good module. And for example, for the MSc course that we ran, every single student gave it the top marks. So out of 25 students taking the MSc module, every single student graded it at the top level, which was very good. For the honours level, again, the majority, probably about 90% of the students rate it as very good, and just a few only rate it as good. So no students ever have any problems with the module and the material, and generally enjoy it, and enthuses them. It wants them to, they want to work in this area, they find it stimulating, and we've done quite a few pieces of research, about the material and how it's actually used. So we've generally learnt from what the students have said, and they generally say, and also we have empirical data to show that the students tend to be watching the lectures just before any assessment. So that reinforces the case that really we need to support our students around assessment time, so that they maybe don't take everything within a lecture in on a continual basis. What they're doing is compiling it around their assessments.
Is it a system that you'd be keen to use in all your modules if possible then?
All of my modules. It makes it easy for me because I record the material once, and then any students can watch the material again and again and again. So as an active researcher, it makes it easier for me that all the material is there. If I have a student taking a reassessment, if I have a distance student, a blended student, it doesn't matter what situation, the material is always there. It's available in many different formats from many different places, so no student can ever say that they couldn't actually get access to material. We have the PDFs, slides of all the material there, so there's almost an infinite number of ways that someone can actually use the material and study, and students can find their own way to study in whatever they're most comfortable with.
Do you think it's a system that other schools could possibly take up?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there is always the worry that students will end up not attending lectures, so it's important that we keep them engaged and enthused. This isn't a replacement for the face-to-face. That has excitement around it. The lecturer will generally give a lecture that's most up to date. There can be questions and so on. So this is really a backup to the main lecture situation, and there should never be a case that the lecture is actually replaced and that students just stay in bed and record the lecture and play it back in their own time. So I think it's up to us to make things as interesting and engaging.
Is it something that, with I guess a bit of practice with graphics and everything, other schools could take up then and would be able to use with our students, do you think?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's been many initiatives where we've tried to develop material and we've had support and so on, but it's never quite worked. I think now the tools are fairly inexpensive, they're easy to use, so more and more it's becoming easier to create good quality material that supports the lecture situation than there ever has been in the past, where packages were very complex to use. Camtasia is such a great package. You just basically get a microphone, you play your PowerPoint in whatever style. I mean, my style is very much around graphics and pictures because that's how I think. When my PhD students, I draw things to them all the time and they take away bits of paper with my drawings, but for other people it's text and bullet points and so on. So it doesn't really matter what the style is, because students should always be exposed to different learning, teaching styles. So Camtasia allows you to do that by playing it back. You narrate over it, and then you can record it and then keep it for the students to use.
Bill Buchanan's module has clearly captured the imagination of his students. As he said though, it's not a substitute for attending the lecture, but it does provide them with full support at home when they want to refer back to topics, especially when they're preparing for exams.
Edinburgh Napier Learning, Teaching and Assessment Resource Bank.